The death of a college student is labelled a suicide, but his parents believe there is more to their son's death than meets the eye. This is the death of Thomas Burkett. Let's step into the cold. 1st of December 1991, 6:10 p.m. Herndon, Virginia. With an afternoon poetry reading over and done with, Beth and Thomas Burkett returned to their home on Muirkirk Lane. Things hadn't gone to plan that day. Their son, Thomas Calvin Burkett, who was born on the 9th of June 1970 in Pennsylvania and was known as Tommy, had been due to attend a poetry reading with his parents. When Tommy didn't return from a friend's house, his parents left without him. It was clear to Beth and Thomas that something was wrong as soon as they arrived home. Lawn furniture had been thrown about, plants had been broken, and the family dog had been injured. It seemed as though the Burkett's home had been broken into, but the situation was about to get much worse. Tommy's Mustang was parked outside the home when Beth and Thomas returned. Tommy was finally home. Thomas headed upstairs to his son's bedroom. He immediately called 911. Tommy would never see another Thanksgiving holiday. He wouldn't reach his 22nd birthday, and he would never graduate from Marymount College. Thomas found his son's body sitting upright on his bedroom sofa, facing the bedroom door. His clothes were ripped. He had cuts and bruises, his right ear was mangled, and his jaw had been broken. Tommy's feet were crossed at the ankles, and his hands lay in his lap. One of Tommy's hands held a revolver. He had been shot once through the mouth. Thomas saw that the revolver's cylinder was unlatched. This meant one thing. The gun couldn't have been fired like that. As the sirens grew louder, residents of Muirkirk Lane began to wonder what was happening. Neighbours watched as 2 ambulances approached Muirkirk Lane. The first ambulance turned down a street next to Muirkirk and stopped at the curb. The emergency workers got out and retrieved something from a small ravine. Once they'd gotten back into the ambulance, they slowly drove away without the sirens on. The second ambulance headed straight to the Burkett's home. Before we continue with the events of the 1st of December, it's important to take a look at what happened during the run-up to Tommy's death. Tommy had been spending the Thanksgiving break at home. On the 30th of November, he drove to Centerville, Virginia, to visit a friend from high school. His friend's house was only 7 miles away, and he arrived there a little after 8 p.m. At midnight, an ATM camera recorded Tommy making a withdrawal. 3 white men are seen approaching him. A couple of hours later, Tommy called his parents to tell them he was staying at his friend's house. He planned to be back home around noon, so he could attend a poetry reading with his parents. When Beth and Thomas left home just before noon to run errands, Tommy hadn't returned home. As they left, they heard the sound of tyres squeaking. What they didn't see was Tommy's blue Mustang being chased by a large, dark-coloured car. After finishing running errands, Beth and Thomas waited until 2:45 p.m. for their son to arrive home. They eventually left for the poetry reading without him. While the family home was empty, neighbours saw odd goings-on at the Burkett house. A white man driving a dark sedan parked 3 houses down from the Burkett's home. The sedan blocked the entrance to Muirkirk Lane and stayed there for 20 minutes. That same sedan was later seen parked outside the Burkett's home. The vehicle was unoccupied. It was noted that the house was shrouded in darkness. No one appeared to be home. At 5:10 p.m., an hour before Beth and Thomas arrived home, Tommy's car was seen heading west on Muirkirk Lane and then stopping outside the Burkett's home. The driver was an unidentified white male, and he idled the car until all of the neighbours had gone inside their homes. Beth later said, "Several neighbours reported seeing Tommy's car being chased by a larger, darker car. One neighbour saw the cars coming and he thought, 'This is serious, it's life or death.' Another neighbour reported that one of the cars involved drove through someone's lawn. Tommy's car was apparently run off the road and he was assaulted. He got away from his attackers and made it back to our house. The emergency services arrived at 6:18 p.m. on the 1st of December. They concluded that, based on the state of rigour in Tommy's body, he had been dead for several hours. Tommy's body was removed from the house by 7:05 p.m. But by then, a series of events had begun that would cause Beth and Thomas to doubt the official ruling of suicide. Little information is available on this case, and the following information comes from Beth and Thomas, who spoke to Unsolved Mysteries about Tommy's death. Fairfax County Police Officer Darrell McEachern was one of the first to respond to the 911 call. When he arrived at the house, he told Tommy's parents, "College students kill themselves all the time. Don't blame yourself." This was before Officer McEachern had seen Tommy's body or the scene itself. Officer McEachern reportedly told the neighbours that statements from them weren't needed, despite what they had witnessed. To Beth and Thomas, it seemed that Officer McEachern had already concluded that Tommy had killed himself before he arrived at the scene. When the lead detective, Thomas Lyons, entered Tommy's bedroom, he emerged holding a bank deposit slip that had the words, "I want to be cremated," written on it. Beth was confident that the handwriting wasn't Tommy's. Tommy's jacket, wallet, glasses and driver's license were missing from his bedroom. Phone books were missing from the home, and Beth later learned that phone books can be used to absorb blood splatters and to minimize bruising. A baseball bat in Tommy's room was missing its gripping tape. According to Beth and Thomas, the police made no attempt to preserve the scene. Footprints leading from the back door to the small ravine were ignored. Tommy's vehicle wasn't searched for evidence, despite an unidentified man being seen in it. The gun wasn't examined. The scene wasn't photographed. The cuts, bruises and torn clothing weren't noted. fingerprints weren't dusted for and no blood samples were taken. Officer Nathan Laney laughed at Beth and Thomas as Tommy's body was taken away. They were then told to, quote, clean up the mess, end quote, by Detective Lyons. Beth and Thomas preserved the scene themselves and paid for it to be examined privately. It was found that the blood spatter pattern was inconsistent with the position of Tommy's body, and the bullet from the wall behind Tommy's head had not been removed. Paul KISH, a bloodstain expert, said that a spray of small red marks found on the stairs weren't consistent with committing suicide in a room while sitting on a sofa. KISH said a violent incident occurred where the blood was shed. A second autopsy confirmed what the first hadn't mentioned, that Tommy had a broken jaw, a damaged right ear, cuts and bruises. Then there were the inconsistencies in the reports regarding Tommy's death. Detective Lyons wrote the time of injury as 6:10 p.m. and the time of death as 7:30 p.m, despite the emergency services statement that Tommy had been dead for several hours when they arrived at the scene at 6:18 p.m. Fairfax Hospital listed the time of death as 8:30 p.m. When asked about this, Detective Lyons said this was the time Tommy was declared dead at the hospital. The Deputy Chief Medical Examiner for the Northern Virginia region, Dr. J. Byers, performed the autopsy the day after a medical examiner report stated that the time and cause of death had been signed. When the Burketts requested copies of the autopsy photos, Dr. Byers said no photos had been taken, even though he had previously shown Thomas a photo. Beth and Thomas eventually received one photo, a close-up of Tommy's face. The Burketts also learned from a friend who worked in law enforcement that at least one Fairfax County police officer knew of Tommy's death by 3 p.m. Interestingly, Dr. Byers conducted the autopsy of White House aide Vincent Foster after he died in 1993. He ruled the death a suicide. When questioned at a Senate hearing about the ruling in 1994, Dr. Byers said he ruled the death a suicide based on trauma to the jaw and the presence of gunpowder residue. While under oath, Dr. Byers then said that in Tommy's case, he ruled the death a suicide based on the absence of jaw trauma and gunpowder residue. Spurred on by this information, Beth and Thomas continued to investigate. Beth began to wonder if Tommy had called 911 the day of his death. A local dispatcher told Beth that Tommy had made 2 calls, one in August and one in October. When Beth asked about the nature of the calls, the dispatcher told her that Tommy had never called 911. According to Beth, a police department personnel was able to confirm that Tommy did call 911. Beth remembered that Tommy had told her in a phone call that someone had broken into his mailbox at Marymount College around the 12th of November. When he died, Tommy was a junior at the college, where he also worked for student painters and in the admissions office. Since starting the fall 1991 semester, Tommy had been repeatedly harassed by students Philip Howley, the son of a police officer, and Donald Adam McEwen, the grandson of a Marymount College trustee. On the 16th of November, just a few days after his mailbox was broken into, Howley assaulted Tommy so badly that his face was unrecognisable. Campus security didn't report the assault to the Arlington police. A couple of days before Tommy died, his mailbox was broken into again, and mail, including his paycheck, was stolen. Campus security filed a report and spoke to Tommy, saying that the matter would be referred to the Arlington police. It wasn't. After Tommy died, the Board of Trustees at Marymount College refused to speak with the Burketts. The director of campus security, Eric Holes, refused to give Beth and Thomas copies of the reports filed after Tommy was assaulted. He reportedly said, "We're not going around asking questions. We're not going to do anything that would hurt the reputations of other students involved in this." On the 3rd of December, the Burketts met with Marymount College official Nancy McMahon. She had reportedly told staff not to speak to Tommy's parents. That day, she gave Beth and Thomas Tommy's driver's license, saying a student had given it to her. McMahon wouldn't say who the student was, but it turned out to be Philip Howley. Beth and Thomas came to believe that Tommy was working as an informant for the Drug Enforcement Agency. They were told that their son had been beaten with a baseball bat. Beth and Thomas concluded that because Tommy was working as a Drug Enforcement Agency informant, a group of students dealing drugs on campus plotted to murder him. The Drug Enforcement Agency has officially denied any connection to Tommy. To this day, the Fairfax County Police considers Tommy's death to be a suicide. Over 100 people sent letters to the then Governor Douglas Wilder asking for a state police investigation into Tommy's death. In 1994, Attorney General Janet Reno told the FBI to investigate the way Tommy's case was handled, after receiving letters from legislators and a petition with over 4,000 signatures. However, nothing came of either of these requests. Tommy's parents continued to work hard at finding out the truth regarding their son's death. They founded the organisation Parents Against Corruption and Cover-Up. After Beth died from cancer in 2003, the organisation's website was taken down. Thomas passed away in 2006, leaving Tommy's sister, Amy, the only surviving member of the Burkett family. Was Tommy murdered, or did he take his own life? Perhaps one day the truth will be known.